So I'm calling the meeting to order and asking Miss Susan to read the announcement, please.
Sure. Meeting notice announcing the date, time, and place of the June 9, 2020 Policy Committee meeting was distributed June 4th to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. Americans with Disabilities Act, the public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item on the agenda is the invocation that I'll do very quickly. If we could bow. Dear Lord, thank you for allowing us to be here. We pray for your wisdom and guidance as we go through another meeting for those with disabilities. We ask that you would be with us today and throughout the night. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Next item is the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda as written?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Well, we don't need one. Now I'm seconding because it's two of us. So I guess I'm seconding. So motion made and seconded with no further discussion. The agenda is adopted. Next item on the agenda is old business. So is David here yet?
No, sir, he's not. Yeah. I've texted him and I've called him. I've offered to do the phone line, but I have not gotten a reply yet.
Okay, sorry. I'm just checking. Okay, well then we're going to have to go into the, I guess we'll go into the electronic communication system directive. I thought I heard something beep. Is everybody hearing me okay, by the way? Because I know that we got a delay here. I just wanted to make, am I being heard fine?
Yeah, you're fine from me, Barry.
Okay. Well, anyway, the first item is the electronic communication system policy. And the primary change to this policy, really the only change to this policy, I think, other than a couple of words, is to make our, well, first is to make us to only go through the policies every 4 years instead of every 3 years is what it says right now. Because realistically, if you look at all the policies we have to do, I think it would take at least 4 years to do it. It's the main reason that I asked that we change that from 3 years to 4 years. And I don't see what problem that would be. We didn't even get any comments about that, because if we ever needed to go back to a policy, which we will do from, I'm sure, from time to time, we can always change it anyway in less time than that if we need to. So that's the first item as far as I know. And of course, it also says that we'll post all of the directives on the website for people to see as we think as we're going to go over them. And the other big thing is that it goes from, not really a big thing, but the other thing is it goes from, they have 10 days to public comment instead of 15. So I'm sure everybody's, or Gary, I'm sure you've read this. So do you have any problems with any of that?
Yeah, I see Jason Taverner's question about the amount of time for the input, and I wasn't at the last policy committee meeting where it was brought up. So maybe you bring me up to speed as to the discussion about the 15 versus the 10 days, whether there was any, just sort of what the decision was based on, how we went from 15 to 10.
Well, the reason that I wanted to do that was, I mean, the reason that we asked about doing that was that we wanted to make certain that there was enough time from one meeting to the next, if we needed to move forward on an item quickly, where at the next meeting we'd have plenty of time to get everything ready for the next meeting and be able to move on to the next meeting instead of having to go 2 or 3 meetings down in order to get to 10 days as opposed to 15. But and I just thought 10 days was more than enough time when you're talking about business days, because you're not even talking about weekends. And so, and the other thing is that I just felt like that 15 days was too long, and I just felt like we needed to change it.
Okay.
I'm
I
trying
know
to
what he thinks, but I mean,
um,
he's the only comment we had.
Yeah, go. Sorry. Go ahead. I think Mary was going to say something.
We're calling Dave right now, trying to get him
Okay.
on the phone.
Got it. Yeah, and I'm fine with that. I mean, it does say a minimum of 10. I mean, there's always a situation where if we get into a particularly complicated subject, we can always extend that period.
Right, we could always extend it if we decided to, and also, it says on there too that if there's a you know, we're not required by any law to do it anyway, and so I mean, if we have a problem to where it also says we can do it without that if we have to.
Right.
So, and it should say that because you never know what's going to come up. But I just feel like we need to do that very much.
Okay. I'm just wondering what the rationale was. That's all.
Okay. Well, then I guess we can vote on this one to be passed.
Do you want to wait to see if we get David on the phone just to have his vote on it?
we're calling
I'm
him
here.
now.
He's here.
Now.
Okay, great.
Okay, good, David. I'm glad you're here. We need your help. I mean, we need your vote, man. The only thing I wanted, I guess you've read the electronic policy. That's what we're on, David.
Yeah,
And it says 10 to 15 days. I mean, it goes from 15 to 10 days. You have no problem with that, right?
no, that was good.
Okay, well, make a motion for me, please, sir, if you don't mind, to accept the policy as we've changed it.
That's good.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Motion made and seconded with no further discussion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, that's the first item on the agenda for today. The next item is the maintenance management contract. And that, there is one change to that I see that I've, based on the comments and based on my thinking of myself, and from talking to Susan about it some too, that the insurance part of this, I guess everybody's read the dragon, they understand what we're doing, right? I don't have to go through that, right? Okay. The main thing to say is that about this is the insurance, which I'm going to ask Susan to insert the language about on page 2 where it says proof of home insurance. They would basically we would keep the insurance in our name for now because the houses are going to be, we're reversing the amount of money that I mean, they're paying for all these things that just like all the other 93% of facilities are now, or currently doing. The other 7% are going to do it too, based on this policy. But the difference is that the insurance is different because it's in our name. And so it's going to be in our name for at least 6 months to a year whenever we rewrite this policy. We're going to rewrite this policy again once we put everything in everybody's name in this stuff, and that will be fixed, and a couple of little things on here will be fixed as well. But for now, we're simply doing this for financial reasons to reverse the commission from paying what they shouldn't be paying based on the other 93% of people. And the other thing is to give people an idea as to how much it really costs them to have a house, so they'll know if they want to keep it or not once we decide to put it into their names in the next 6 months to a year at the most. I hope it'll be less than a year, but we'll just have to see. And like I say, we have every intention of rewriting this policy at that time, and this one will be no longer valid at that time. So, but on page 2 it says proof of home insurance. So, Susan, do you want to tell us what we would insert there?
Sure. In coordination with Chris Clark, we've drafted the following language to insert there under 2A1. We'll fit in until such time the properties are deeded to the provider, any premiums incurred by DDSN related to insuring the properties will be billed and reimbursed by providers. Billed to and reimbursed by providers. How does that sit?
That fits with me. That's what I was thinking.
Do you mind saying, can we have it read one more time?
Sure.
Okay. So again, we're going to fit it under 2A1 where it references proof of home insurance until such time that properties are deeded to the provider. Any premiums incurred by DDSN related to insuring the properties will be billed and reimbursed, or billed to and reimbursed by providers.
And again, we'll fix that permanent whenever the policy is rewritten, because they would get their own insurance. But the next item down here that we got the comment about was that I wanted to mention was about a termite bond. I do believe, obviously now we should keep a termite bond, but I believe we should require them to have termite bonds even on the next policy after this one in 6 months, just because we want to make sure there's no termites in a building in case it was ever referred back to us for any reason. So I disagree with whoever made the comment about we don't need termite bonds, because we do need to require termite bonds in my opinion, but that obviously we do now. And this is just about this policy. So there's moving on from this policy, there's really no other comments that are relevant to this particular policy because, or what we're doing today, because we're going to be rewriting this policy once it's deeded over into the provider's names, once the actual homes are deeded over into the policy's names, just like it is for the other 93% of people in our state. So
Can I make a comment, Chair, on the termite bond issue?
yes, go ahead.
So my understanding currently is out of all these facilities, we only have like 3 that we have termite bonds on right now. And we do not mandate termite bonds for any other facility owned or operated by a provider. So I don't understand why these would be any different if we deed them over. Are you then proposing that we mandate proof of termite bonds on every facility in the state, which is about 2,000? Isn't it about 2,000? We're looking at facility numbers today, Mary, because we're looking at something else.
It's not that number, not that high, but there's quite a few.
That was like 1,700 residences. So we just need to be clear how y'all want to manage that. I do believe if you have an existing termite, we should advise termite bond to suggest highly that they maintain that and not let it lapse. But we don't have termite bonds ourselves right now, so we're going to cast that requirement onto a provider network that we haven't even paid for owning it ourselves.
So, staff's recommendation is that it be removed as a requirement.
So we're basically talking about striking A2 then, the proof of termite bond, and all the subsequent references to termite bond.
Well, I think we should recommend that they consider, I mean, especially if you're in a termite, a high termite area, I guess like coastal areas and stuff, low-lying areas. But we don't require any proof of termite bonds now on anything.
Okay, well, let me just say that I guess the reason I'm concerned about that is because I'm in the low country and you have serious problems with termites here. And I'm in a brick house and I had termites at one time, but I'm not opposed to striking it, except to say that we would strongly recommend that they have termite bonds, particularly we really should, I guess you get into trouble if you start requiring in a certain district, but we should strongly recommend they have it in the first district.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of a home rule sort of situation. They know these facilities better than we do. They know the ones that have had problems in the past. I think mandating from far from Columbia.
I think the District 7 also needs to have that in there.
Well, then, let's just say that we strongly recommend it for the state, that you do that, but we're not requiring it then.
Is there
I
any way
mean-
they could grandfather in those that don't?
No, you can't grandfather in termite bonds, you either have it or you don't.
Okay.
You know, are you talking about requiring the grandfathering in the requirement or actually, well, the problem is this, once it becomes somebody else's property, we probably need to treat them like we do treat all the other properties. So when you start stepping out on one group of homes versus what we've done with the other group of homes, that's where it gets a little dicey. So, owner of a home, I think it becomes your responsibility to decide what you're going to do with that home. So I think that if we're going to turn over property, we need to turn over the decision-making for those properties too, because now they're taking care of it. We shouldn't be telling them, other than the licensing stuff that we have to do, to make sure it's maintained properly, then it becomes incumbent on them to do what they're supposed to do as owners.
Well, but encompassing in that maintaining properly would be that's why it wouldn't be bad to say we strongly encourage a termite bond, because that really is part of maintenance. But if we've never done it for anybody else, we really can't do it for these. I certainly don't want to do anything. That's my whole point behind this, is if we want to make it like everybody else's, all these facilities like every other facility. That's not the whole point, but that's a big part of the point behind it, and why it should have been done 25 years ago. But literally,
if we want to come up with a document because we have really good real estate guidance on our commission, I think at some point, it might not be a bad idea to come up with guidance on like what you should do, what kind of insurance you should have, what kind of like the termite thing, and then go on through maintenance issues, what you should normally do.
I'm working with Andrew right now on that. Andrew is he comes and talks to y'all about our city PIP and stuff. He'll be here at the next commission meeting, but he's our engineering and planning guy. And I am challenging him to issue a maintenance guide with best practices related to a variety of things related to roof and roof maintenance, HVAC maintenance, things of that nature. So to have you guys give input once that draft is ready, I would love that, just as an outside voice.
And that way we'd be giving guidance, but we wouldn't be just mandating this, that, and the other thing outside of what's already mandated in standard.
Yeah. And again, I don't even necessarily know whether, I certainly think it's a good idea. I don't know whether that necessarily even rises level where we need a policy on it, right? I mean, I don't know.
It's a maintenance guide.
DDS. Yeah, I
It'd
don't
be
know.
a maintenance guide, you know? Mm-hmm.
well, yeah, you're right. It may not even rise to the level of needing a policy. It might just be a guide, like you say, Gary. But last thing I would say about it is for today, to move on from this policy for today, we can just strike that from it, that 2A from it, and not have anything about termite bond in there for now. And we'll talk about it more in 6 months or 8 months whenever we do the next, policy, whenever we basically fix this policy more permanently.
So I think that would also then lead us to strike 2B7, which again is a reference to maintenance of termite bonded protection as deemed prudent by DDSN.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Okay, you got that, Susan?
I do.
Okay, moving on. Then I don't think there's any other item on here that we need to really discuss that I know of, unless somebody else has seen something that I have not. The rest of it is what we had been deciding since April, what we had talked about since April. So is there a motion to accept this as we've just amended it?
I move.
Motion is made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. With no further discussion, those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, motion carries. Thank God. That is a big deal that we just got. We need to, I'm a big on chocolate, and so we should celebrate with chocolate tonight, because we just got a 30-year-old policy change.
We'll have to get the commission still.
It's still got to go through the commission.
Yeah.
That's true, but we got we got a big step done today. I'll be very surprised if it doesn't go through the commission, but we'll talk about that then. And by the way, that is to be at the commission meeting at the next meeting, and it will be voted on at that time, which is in June. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the relatives family. Oh, yeah, relatives family and paid caregivers of respite services.
Commissioner Morris, if you don't mind, could we go back up to old business C, which is final approval of the policy committee procedures?
Oh, sorry, I skipped. Yeah, we need to final approve the policy. That's right, C, I'm sorry, I didn't do that. Yeah, we need to do that next.
Would you like Susan to review that for the group, since we have a couple of new commissioners online?
Yeah, we can do that quickly. Go ahead, Susan.
Okay, so we've been working hard to establish a policy. So we have a lot of clarity among the policy committee members as well as staff how to proceed with reviews of policies, directives, and standards. And just for a little background, when we talk about policies, we're really referring to commission policies, which would be reviewed in policy committee and then brought to the commission for approval if there are edits. We do periodic reviews of those. And then departmental directives, which are kind of the rules mixed with some procedure and how we execute delivery of services. And then service standards, which pertain to such areas as licensing or particular services provided through either state funded or waiver programs. So all of those have fit through the executive limitations policy, which is a commission policy that these need to travel through the commission for review, particularly when they pertain to significant changes in the service delivery system or any increases or restrictions in reporting, abuse, neglect, exploitation, critical incidents, or sexual assault. So there is kind of a formal method to what comes through committee, what's necessary to come to committee and go through the commission. So this procedure would set forth a way for this business to be done. And so we've outlined that in the procedure 2, and then kind of split out if some of these documents would be undertaken a review in the policy committee, how that would work, as well as if there's a specific subject matter of one of these documents that would be better seen and for review in another committee, such as the Audit and Finance Committee, or if the policy committee would determine that due to the topic of the document, it would be more operational or service related, just as sort of procedural kinds of things that would fit with it going through a staff review procedure. There is a public comment requirement, so we just referred to that in the first directive, the Electronic Communication System Directive, that revisions would go out and be posted for 10 business days at a minimum for review, and then there's a cycle where we bring them back and incorporate those comments and have discussion, and then seek any additional approval before they're finalized. So that's just kind of a high overview of this 2-page procedure. At the last policy committee meeting, we had kind of a mini version of this, and this is really just putting it into more of a procedural format. Are there any questions?
I don't have any questions except to say that when we have a new directive or when it says down here about new directives or standards, it would just behoove us if we end up with a new directive or a standard that we try to combine it into another one, because if I don't know how many of y'all have seen seen them all on paper, but it's an interesting, wonderful volume that was sent to me, which I'll talk to you more about later, Susan. That woman did a wonderful job, whoever did that, actually putting that together. Although it's too large, I'm going to have to make it into 3 different binders, but it is astounding how many policies we have, and if we can combine one policy with another, that might be helpful in the future instead of making a new policy. But that was all I wanted to say about that. Whenever it's whenever it's appropriate, we should consider making it, encompassing it with another policy, a new one.
So and and not to be wearing two hats here. There has been some discussion in the past of the ability of the chair to delegate certain policies outside of the policy committee. For example, there have been some specific finance and audit related things that we've said, instead of sending it to the policy committee, we've just had the chairman directly send it to the finance and audit committee for review, because it wasn't considered the sort of policy that was subject to, quote unquote, the policy committee review. Was there any discussion at all about that, Susan, within this? Do we feel like we need to clarify this? I just want to make sure we don't run into a problem where it's a policy, therefore it has to go to the policy committee first. Does that make
Sure.
sense? I mean, there's policies and there's policies.
Sure. And I think there was a time in the past when policy committee wasn't meeting very frequently or wasn't functioning, and so that was a pathway. The way
Right.
this procedure reads is that under 2, which is procedure under C, it says, in coordination with the policy committee chairperson, the commission, DSN committees, or staff may request review and reprioritization of a policy directive or standard. And then for each, they'll decide if you undertake a review within the committee, direct to other committees, or delegate to staff. So that's how we address that. It doesn't specifically
Right.
say the chair of the commission could delegate to another committee, but
Right. I mean, it says the opposite there. I mean, it says the committee will decide whether
Right.
they're going to review it or direct it to another committee for review. So,
it does.
It does say the committee will decide, yeah.
so basically it's always going to the committee to make that decision, as opposed to essentially the inherent power of the chair to designate certain matters to committee. I mean, that under Robert's rules, that's always sort of been the way you look at it. There are certain things that the chair can say, I'm going to assign that to this group, whether it's a standing committee or an ad hoc committee or whatever the case may be, to do these things. And so
if you wanted to recommend an edit to that, we could discuss
well,
that.
I guess I'm looking for feedback from the other commission members with regard to that. There are reasons for it. There are reasons against it, depending on who you got sitting in the chairman's seat and who you got, how often the policy committee is meeting. I mean, that was part of the problem we had before, was when the policy committee wasn't meeting or wasn't active, stuff was going there, everything was going there, and it was sort of like going into a black hole. So we had to have certain things directed elsewhere so we could just get some work done. I guess that's my concern.
I think, Gary, you also need to review the executive limitations policy that floated through everything in the kitchen sink into what had to go to the policy committee.
Right.
So I think that when this was written, we kind of had that policy sitting right next to it. So we didn't, we didn't go against that policy, but we were trying to make a coherent procedure to get stuff done. And it was very difficult to do. So the recommendation is that, at the beginning, I had made a recommendation last year that we have an actual commissioner's directive on, or commissioner's policy on, how do we review directives in the state, and kind of put them in buckets, and that where it could be dealt with. And it doesn't have to be sitting in the executive limitations policy where it is just, there's just so much in there.
Right.
To where it actually contradicts itself. If you read it, the lines contradict themselves. So we can, again, this was written to try to stay,
Right.
not contradict that policy.
Right. And so maybe the edit that I would suggest would be under C, would just be an additional sentence that future additions or revisions to existing policies may how do I want to put this?
Why would
Maybe
we
I
say
need-
that? Why would we say that if the commission wants to move it, they can vote at the next meeting to move something out of policy to some other committee. I mean, because what you basically be doing is saying, if the policy chairman is not interested in moving it, then you get the whole commission to vote to move it, and then they would move. So why can't we just do that?
I think that's a good option. Yeah, I'd not thought about doing it that way, but I think that's a good option. And then, and then just say that this policy will be subject to modification based upon other policies that we passed regarding the use of the committees. Because that's essentially what we were talking about before, Mary, correct? When you talk about the different buckets, as it were, we were going to have a policy to determine what went into what bucket for each policy, right?
Mm-hmm. And it was going to be subset, so you had an actual procedure written in there.
Right. So I'd like to leave some room for that policy, for that potential policy that we may revisit at some point in time, in there. But I do like Barry's idea as well, that we add in under C that upon vote of the commission as a whole, policies may be directed to another committee, and also add in that this section may be modified to conform with future policies regarding the designation of materials to various other committees.
And again, this is a procedure. This is
Right.
just something we need to publicize how the traffic is going to move.
Right.
And we've got a traffic jam, so.
Right.
The only way, the only problem you'd have is if the chairman refused to take it out of the chairman of the policy meeting refused to take it out of his committee, and that would be very unusual, I would think, if we just simply said that the rest of the board could take that up at the next meeting and decide, that would solve the problem, because if the majority of the commission wanted to do it and the policy chairman didn't want to, it would be solved. I think that'd be extraordinarily unusual, but I guess it could happen.
I just want some flexibility in there. That's where I'm coming
Happens all the
from.
time. Happens all the time in the legislature. You'll get something that's referred to one committee, but it has more than one facet to it. It has there's a finance element to it, let's say, and it's got a code section in it that could go to the general committee because it's Department of Social Services. So it could end up going to two committees for review. So that's and how does that happen? Well, usually on a unanimous consent motion. And the two chairmen have gotten together, and of course, nobody wants a big deal out of stuff unless it's highly controversial. But then it's voted on, if it is controversial, the chairman of the second committee that wants to take a shot at the legislation, he or she asks for it to go to his or her committee, and then I object for unanimous consent. Well, then the whole body decides on it, and they're unless it's incredibly controversial, you would be loath to vote against or make a big deal out of a bill going to a second committee that has code oversight as well as the first committee that it went to. So what we're talking about right here is very reasonable to possibly have it, if it gets tied up in one committee and comes to the full body, but it needs to be reviewed by a second committee, pop it in the second committee and let them take a look and see what their concerns are, because they have knowledge of the code sections better than committee number one, because virtually many bills have more than one code section inferential to them. So I think the suggestion's a good one, and Gary's seeing what could take place in the future, and that needs to be dealt with. So good, just leave it to the full body. It's usually worked out with the committee chairman. I mean, and then it's a unanimous consent motion. Nobody even sees it. It just pops up on the floor, and it's over with in about 8 seconds.
Yeah, it's just the what if scenario. And I'm fine with leaving, again, if we're going to be doing another policy in the future, we can integrate it that way. So we don't necessarily have to put that in here. But I like Barry's idea is elaborated on by David. I would like to have that in there.
Yeah, this is Ed Miller. I agree with the options.
Well,
You are showing the reason why we need that commission overall direct, policy on how to move, because our policies and directives are our way of governing this agency. So I think that having a policy directed to that would be smart. So we'll start drafting that.
So I would make a motion to approve the procedure as presented with the addition under C of the language in the event that a majority of the commission votes to transfer a policy to review another committee to review the policy. That would be voted on at the full commission meeting.
Second.
Who seconded? It can only be David or me or.
Yeah. It needs to be David or Barry at this moment until we.
Oh, I'll be glad to second. I'll be glad to second it. David.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Hearing no further discussion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. No problem with that. Susan, will you send that to me whenever it's finished,
Yes.
please? Okay, next item on the agenda relates to, I believe, unless I'm mistaken again, relates to the relatives of family members serving as paid providers for respite services. The only thing that I would ask about this is basically saying that if you're a husband and wife, or if you're not a husband and wife, if you are the primary caregiver of a person, you cannot be paid obviously for respite services because you're already being paid through the agency, correct? And that goes for the husband and the wife, or if they're or whatever the two people are that's living in the house, correct?
So the policy is seeking put in some, clarity about who can be provided payment for providing respite when you are a relative or family member. And so it's indicating that a primary support provider, a spouse of the respite recipient, a parent, step-parent, foster parent, or legal guardian of a recipient who's a minor, or a court-appointed guardian cannot be paid for providing respite. And this goes along with the requirements for service.
Yeah, so think about it this way. The definition of respite services is to provide a break for the person who's providing primary care to that person. So you can't provide a break to yourself.
Right.
That's why those people are excluded. Basically, what it says is if you're the primary caretaker for the person receiving services, you are getting the service because you need a break. Therefore, you can't be paid to provide the service. You follow me, Barry?
I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Okay, good.
What I guess the part that I'm asking about is why does it matter that whether they live in the household or not? I think that they should not be able to be paid to give services whether they live in the household or not. Because
right. So there's a Medicaid policy about what family members can be paid to provide certain waiver services. So we have another policy that talks about the family members that can be paid to do personal care and that kind of thing. The whole idea of this policy is it's solely for the service of respite. So what we're saying is if you're the primary caregiver, we're not going to pay you to do respite, period. Right? That's really kind of it.
right.
Because the service is actually for that
you.
primary
That's right.
caregiver.
That's right.
So if I'm not going to pay you for a service that was supposed to give you a rest.
Right. And the idea of the family members that can be paid is a Medicaid policy that governs all waivers in the state, not just waivers that are operated by DVSN.
So in other words, if we decided we did not want them to, if they were not living in the same household, they still couldn't get paid because they were the husband or I mean, they were the direct descendant of a person. We couldn't do that, you're saying, because Medicaid makes us do that.
What we do is follow the Medicaid policy, and the Medicaid policy excludes certain family members from being paid at all. And those family members are those direct family members, spouses, parents of minor children, children of service recipients. Now, during COVID, they've kind of relaxed a few of those requirements. But I think from a waiver perspective, we kind of have to follow whatever's in state policy, or we would have to amend our waivers in order to change who could provide it, because all the waiver documents point to that state policy related to family members providing care.
I guess I'm just asking, does anybody know why it would have A in there? Because it says a parent of an adult respite provider does not reside in the parent's household. What I'm trying to get to is, if they shouldn't be paid, they shouldn't be paid if they're not in the household either. I don't understand why they're paid if they're not in the household. What does it matter what household you live in?
So respite, again, it's all about the definition of respite. So respite is the service that is to give the primary caretaker a break. So let's say that Pat lives with his grandmother, and Pat's an adult. And Pat's mother doesn't live with Pat and his grandmother, but his grandmother provides his care 24/7. If Pat's parent, because he's an adult, was not living in the home, they could be paid to provide respite for the grandmother. And that's part of that DHHS policy. You can pay the parent of an adult child. You just can't pay the parent of a minor. And you can't pay a legal guardian, which is why the number B says a non-legally responsible family member who doesn't live in the house could be paid to provide respite. As long as they're not the primary person who provides care to that person.
Well, it's so that if it's a minor and they don't live in the household, you can do that. But if they do live in the household, you can't.
So if they're a minor, the parent cannot be paid to provide care.
But
Whether
a
they
brother
live
or
in the household
sister
or not.
who's older,
Correct.
right.
Parents of minor children, spouses, legal guardians can't, regardless of where they live. Parents of adult children can be paid. They can be paid for personal care if they live in the household, but they can't be paid for respite because then they're the primary caregiver.
Okay. All right. Well, the only other thing I would ask that we would add to this policy at the end, then I guess we'll leave it like it is, because it's really a Medicaid thing, and we don't really want to get involved with trying to change that. I'm not like one of our former commission members and thought we could do whatever we wanted to in the state. So, the one thing that I would add, and one thing that bothers me about this thing is, if you are paying a family member to do something, then if I'm their primary caregiver, which God forbid I would do that, because I couldn't imagine, but if I was a primary caregiver and I was paying somebody, because my family wanted me to pay Tom to take care of this child because Tom don't work much and he just kind of sits around and don't do nothing, but he needs some extra money, so I'm gonna get him to take care of my child. But the problem with that is, if he doesn't do a good job, then I don't feel comfortable firing him because he's my aunt or my uncle or whatever, or getting rid of him and getting somebody else that does a better job caring for my child, or my minor child primarily is what I'm thinking of here. I just think that it should say, I want to see what the rest of the commission thinks, that it should say that we encourage them. This document right here says that you don't have to get one of these people to do it. I would think we should say, and even all of the case managers should say that we encourage you to find someone else to do it, because I would want them to have somebody they were comfortable getting rid of if they didn't do a good job.
Okay. Barry, you're kind of straying into an area of quality monitorship at that point. I would say that, first off, most families are a little bit more comfortable with people they know coming into their home on a regular basis. It's very difficult to have a lot of strangers into your house. And I can say that from personal experience. But I think that this is a family decision as to who their respite caregiver would be, for the most part. And the case manager then monitors that, one, that the hours are being provided when they're supposed to be provided, and that the family is satisfied with the service. So I don't think this policy should go into monitoring quality or recommending who you get for a caregiver and stuff. That's really between the case manager and the family to make those decisions, and for the case manager to monitor that service. Does that kind of make sense?
It does make sense, but I just think it'd be nice if we could say that we would encourage them to. It just should be at least a little bit stronger statement than it says now, because right now it just says. That, let's see.
This policy.
Respite providers are not under obligation to hire relatives, family members to provide services. I mean, that should be more obvious. It should say that not only are you not obligated to do it, but we would encourage you to look at all options you have. I mean, it should just be stronger than that, so that they get more people that are not. I'm not saying they can't be. It's just I would have a very hard time firing somebody that was in my family, or getting rid of somebody. Call it firing if you want, because they really are a subcontracted employee of this person, is what they're doing whenever they get in respite services. So, I mean, it's up to the rest of the commission, but up to the rest of the committee. But I just think we should add something in there that says we encourage. But I mean, that's just my opinion, that we encourage you to look at other options or whatever. Because it would be, it's just interesting to me that it has to go so far as to say you're not obligated. Well, they should certainly know they're not obligated. The opposite of obligated.
Right.
Okay.
So the statement that you're talking about, where it says respite providers are under no obligation, they're really not talking about the participant or the family. So what happens is, if a family member is going to provide respite, they have to meet the same training and certification requirements that any other person is required to complete in order to do respite. And respite is provided by different kinds of providers in the community, like personal care aid, direct enrolled providers provide respite. So what this policy is saying is CarePro Medical One, who's a personal care provider, is under no obligation to hire Mary's family member just because she wants them to do respite for her. That's what that statement means. It doesn't really mean the family is not under an obligation, because really with the family, it's about a choice of who they want to provide their respite, whether it be a family member or a non-family member, or somebody that they know from their church or whatever.
Right. Well, this policy does is lay out who can and who cannot.
Right.
And it's basically just a legalistic document to say, if you're in this category, sorry, but you can't provide respite for this family. If you're in this category, you can.
But you got to meet all
You
the
have
other
to
criteria.
meet all the criteria.
Right.
So if you go to get hired to be a respite sitter, they're going to do a background check.
Right.
If you've got felonies in your history, that provider's not going to hire you.
Right.
So basically, no matter if you are a family member or not.
Balance on that.
Okay?
Balance left in penny tax. Okay.
Okay. All right. If nobody else has anything to add, I'll just move on and we'll leave it like it is.
Well,
Are
we looking to have a motion on this one?
Yeah, I'm fixing the motion now. I'm saying I guess we'll just motion to, somebody want to make a motion to do anything different or leave it like it is?
With Calvin, you go with Calvin. We need to go with Cal.
Let me tell Ed, it's on live. Mr. Miller, your mic is live. You might want to mute yourself, please.
So I'd make a motion to approve it as presented at this time, without amendment.
Without amendment, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right, we got a motion to approve without amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second, David.
All right, David, second. Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is community and inclusive residential services standards. This standard, which I've gone through, I believe relates to compliance with final rule. And so we really don't, there's really not a lot to discuss about it unless somebody has something specific to discuss. It simply is getting us into the final rule requirements of the federal government. So is there anybody that wants to discuss anything about that? I have nothing to discuss about that. Mary, do you have anything?
I just want to say that these have been out there for quite some time in the community, waiting for approval. Right, Susan?
Yes, these were sent out for public comment prior and gone through policy committee, and not this policy committee, but last year's, and had gone through various work groups, and we received no further feedback upon the second round of review. So they've just been sitting, waiting. I'm saying these because these next three items, this one and the other two, are in the same status. So I won't have to do myself later.
Yeah, I was fixing to say I wanted to vote on them separately just because they're big, but
Yes.
Anyway, does anybody have anything to say about the first one, which is residential?
I do not, Gary.
Okay, thank you. Here, anybody want to make a motion that we accept it as it is? I mean, as it's been modified?
I so move.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Hearing no further discussion, those in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the residential habilitation standards. It's the same situation with that. Does anybody want to make a motion?
Any
Should we
comments?
accept it as amended?
Same thing.
I'll make that motion.
So moved.
Yep. Then I'll second
I'll
David's.
second it.
Motion made and seconded.
The video.
Yeah, no, we have a delay, sorry. Motion made and seconded. Is there further, hearing no further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries again. The last one on that section is the residential licensing standard. It's pretty much the same story. That's just getting us up to final rule standards. And so there's really, I don't think there's much else to discuss about it either. I've looked over it, but it's very procedural oriented as opposed to policy oriented. I think there's a big difference. But procedures to me are much different than policies. But anyway, this is more of a procedure. But so is there a motion to accept this one too?
So moved.
Second. Yeah, we had two so moves. Gary, you want a second?
I'll defer to David this time. So let David made the motion. I'll second.
We'll just take turns.
A minute.
Yeah, we're taking turns. Okay, well, we want to make it formal. We are a multi-million-dollar agency that must be formal, so, okay. Motion made and seconded. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next section of our agenda is, it relates to referral to another committee. It's finance management for personal funds. And I really think that it should go through the finance committee. I don't think, unless Mary wants to correct me, I don't think this is in a big hurry. And so I think we just put this to the finance committee and let them take care of it at their leisure, basically. So I would ask that, sorry, that's my fax machine. I would ask that it be, that we make a motion to move this to the finance committee.
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second. Even though I serve on that committee, so you're gonna have to, bounce it back and forth.
Well, that's true. I'm actually serving on it too, so we're going to be bouncing it back and forth. It's true, but I really think we should, though. All things considered, it just, I mean, I don't believe that in all circumstances at all. But even just because it relates to funds, I don't necessarily think it should be a finance committee. But this one should, I think. But okay, motion made and seconded. Hearing no further discussion, is there? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. In section 3, the rest of these, I kind of thought should be referred to the staff, because to me they are much more procedural than they are policy oriented. But I am not opposed at all to going through any of them that anybody would like to. But the only one that I would even consider, the only one I had a comment about was the compliance with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. If we want to go through that one, we can. But I would trust obviously, I always trust the staff. It's not that. It's not having to do anything with trust. It has to do with, if we want to change something, we might want to look at it, but it's not trust, it's change really. But the only thing I would say about that is, I think that if we, that we should let Constance get involved with that one directly and make sure that we're not going further than the Civil Rights Act of 1964, because I can't imagine it just seems odd to me, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 would talk about foreign languages and having to have, people, having to have us being required to do certain things in different languages and all that sort of thing. But if it does, it does, but it just seems odd to me. But anyway, that's the only one that would, to me, was the least bit controversial. The rest of them really are just, as far as I can tell, are just making minor amendments to all of those things that are really procedural related, like I say. Does anybody have any other comments about those?
So Barry, is what you're contemplating here with this referral, that rather than having the policy committee present these ultimately to the full commission for a vote, it would ultimately be staff that would be making, that here's our recommendation that we vote on. So we're sort of skipping the step of having the policy committee vote on it, debate it, et cetera, and just go straight to commission.
That's right. It would go. That's exactly right. It would go straight to commission, because we don't see any reason to bog our committee down into these things, basically.
Sounds good to me.
So Commissioner Malfris, according to the procedure, if these are delegated to staff, and by the way, they've all been out for external comment already, because these are remnants of old policy committee work and old way we reviewed directives. So according to that procedure you all approved earlier in the meeting, when you delegate these to staff, we would go ahead and just follow them through the process for approval. They would not go back to the commission, back through this committee, or back to the commission again for approval, because you would be saying these are topics that do not fall within the kind of review that you would undergo. Staff would give that authority. So in the past, Mary would, the director, the state director would sign off on that, and the policy director, myself. So that's,
Okay, well,
that's how that procedure would work.
I'll keep that in mind for next time we do this. Then I was thinking that it would come to the commission and we'd vote all in one, but just to make it formal.
I think that you might want to go back and revisit the ones that you chose to go just to staff. I would think that the ones that go to staff are internal employee issues, like how we, you know, like our vacation days, I mean, whatever, what's the last, our dress code, or the things that we do internally, which is more operation in Bent than service related. I was kind of surprised to see a couple of these on here. So I have no problems bringing our recommendations to the full commission for a vote on these policies. They've been out there for a long time, and they've been reviewed, and they've got lots of comments on it, or not really a lot of comments, but they've been taken into account. And what we can do is just go ahead and give you a clean copy and recommend, make a recommendation to the full commission. And that way we can ask any questions about them can be asked and answered at that time.
I agree, and I think that in most cases we should lean toward doing that to allow the commission to vote, just to make it formal, because I don't think I'm under one of those people that's not sure that our commission votes on enough stuff, and so I'd rather vote on something even if it didn't need to be voted on by the commission, and just to make sure that everybody was fine. But I think it can be. I think I agree wholeheartedly that we can do that as a full commission and not have to do it through the policy committee. The main reason I put all these in there is all the reasons I just said. The other reason is there is so many policies for the policy committee to go through, and there's several that are very that I think are going to be interesting to go through and get and see what the members of the committee's views are in a future time, and those are the ones we're going to really. There are many that we're going to really need to dig into, I think, and because of that, I wanted to get as many of these policies that have been out for a long time done and over, and move on to others, because there are others that we need to look into that I don't know right now, but they're probably not even on our radar screen, but they'll need to be brought up before, you know, the next 12 months. And if they are, then we need to talk about them then. But that's the only reason I would say that. I'm not trying to make light work of the policy committee, but I will tell y'all, I mean, I don't know how many of you looked at all of them at one time, but it is a monumental number, and I do want to get through a lot of them, as many as we can through this year.
Well, and since these have been out for a while, we could actually go through them. Can we not talk about these policies now and have the committee vote on them and bring it to the?
Sure, it sounds like that's the action you're taking. You're actually, instead of referring them for review and finalization with staff, you're wanting to keep them in policy committee. So we would go forth now and discuss each directive according to the direction the meeting's taking now.
Except I haven't looked at this.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can do that. I mean,
Oh, no, we're not talking about those. We're talking about section 3. Section 3, so numbers 6 through 12 in section 3, if you're trying to keep them in policy committee instead of delegating to staff, then
I know, but
that would be a recommendation if you could go ahead and review.
we're not. We were just making. We were going to just let the commission vote, but we can go through them. I mean,
I think we might need to go back and look at that procedure, because you guys already voted on the procedure, and that was part of that procedure. So do we want to go ahead and make kind of reopen that discussion? Can we do that? So you can add the line about it going to the full commission versus for the staff to be doing these?
Well, I don't have any problem with that. Do you, Gary?
No, I'm looking back at I mean, we've got delegate to staff, and I just assumed that meant delegate to staff to bring to the commission directly, as opposed to having. I mean, that was my assumption on that. I guess that we need to clarify that.
Oh, that also says there's a flaw with the process, the way it was written. If you have a different idea as to what the intent was, then it's not written right. So we need to add that in there. If that's what you think it needs to be, then that's what we do. So I have no problems putting that in there.
So
But I think we need to make another adjustment to the process, if that's okay with you.
So there are 180 documents in 4 years that then, if there's no vehicle to execute the executive limitations policy as written with the procedure to delegate to staff, that will always have to be discussed in committee and then go to the commission. So that, if we think that's, and it's certainly within full authority of your committee and your commission to decide to do those things, but that is why that was kind of built into the procedure for you all to kind of route and funnel certain topics and certain documents that were not of the kind of scope that you were interested in looking at. If you want to do 100% of those, that's going to be a much larger workload. That's just my word of caution.
Mary, can I throw in 2 cents?
Sure.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. This is Pat. We can do it either way. I would bring up the point, if I was a commissioner and I'm going to vote on something, I would want to really understand what I'm voting on. And when things come through the policy committee, you have 3 commissioners who are really vetting it. So when it's presented to the commission, you have confidence that the commissioners have provided enough in-depth analysis and you rely on their observations and you approve it. If staff does all the work and you guys don't see any of that work, and then Mary shows up at a commission meeting and says, I got 8 policies I want you to approve. If I'm sitting in your chair, I'd ask myself the question, I'm approving something, I trust Mary 100%, but I'm approving something en masse that I really haven't looked at in detail. So I would just suggest, if you're going to delegate. Don't delegate and then bring it back up, because I think you're putting yourself at risk of approving things that as the commissioners haven't really vetted through. So I think it's more efficient to delegate and let Mary approve. And if you bring it back to yourself, I think you're just looking for work overload, because now you're going to feel like you have to read these 12 policies before Mary presents them. And then all of a sudden, we're going to open up a debate on these 12 policies in the limited time we have at a commission. So I would ask us to consider, do we want to fully delegate low risk matters to Mary, which I think is the intent of our proposal? And if you circle them back, that is 100% fine. I would just weigh that with the time commitment and the risk of you voting on things that maybe you haven't devoted the time to. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, well, let me say this. The policy committee would see every one of these, right? And then we would decide as a policy committee whether it would go to the staff or not, correct?
Yeah,
Correct.
That's what we were kind of doing right
You
now.
would look at them and say, this is just procedural, we're not
Yeah.
going to take it to the full
Low risk.
commission. Right.
Mhm.
Sort and delegate, right.
Well, that's an interesting question, Gary, because it just makes us, as a commission, want to trust the policy committee chairman. But generally speaking, I would do that. Of course, I am the one right now, so of course I trust me. But that is an interesting point. We need to, and that's worth the remainder of the hour to discuss this if we need to, because but that was, I mean, obviously, if anybody has anybody in the policy committee has a difficulty with any of these policies, then I, as a policy chairman, would immediately snatch it out and bring it up to the full commission, because I'd have no problem with it.
100%.
Exactly.
But that's what I would recommend that we do. But it does give extra authority to the policy committee, but some committee has to have a little bit of extra authority, I think. But that's where the chairman can decide who those policy committee members are. But I mean, I've read these and I don't see anything controversial about any of them, but except now the only thing I would, since I've read this thing a second time last night, the only thing I'd have a little bit of pause about is that 1964 Civil Rights Act compliance. But other than that, I have no problems with any of these, because they really are behavioral scale. I mean, they really are procedural things, suicidal behavior stuff. I mean, it's just procedural things. It really is. It's not policy things at all, in my opinion.
I do want to make sure everybody understands that we've, Constance, our Holloway, our attorney, has been engaged on all our policies. We've asked her to be part of any development of policies And when we finally, put one together, it's running through her. So she's always on board with that. That's a major part of her job duties.
Well, it certainly should be. I mean, Constance is not here right now, right?
She is right
I'm
here.
So, and just a reminder on this one, before we ask Constance to say something, is that, the updates in this compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 64, the 702 DD number 11 on the section of your agenda, we said we updated language on the 504 amendment and inserted language on requesting interpreter and translation service funding assistance. And that has already gone out for external review. Again, it's been a while, but that went out for external review and that period expired. So it would be at the status for finalization. So, edits were made, went out for public feedback. We have lots of advocates. We have lots of attorneys who read things out there as well as internally. And that's the status of that. So she's got it in front of her. If there's a specific question on a specific page, I'm sure she can queue it up.
Now, this one.
Well, I do have a question actually about that, and I'll move forward from it because I think it's much more important what Gary brought up, and that we as a commission talk about that. But is it required by is it truly required by the 1964 Civil Rights Act that we give people interpreters and pay and all that? I mean, does it really talk about interpretation? I mean, multi-language and all that?
Off the top of my head, I think it does. It talks about that if they're not English speaking, then you have to get the information to them in the language they understand.
It's a reasonable accommodation.
Yeah, it's a reasonable accommodation. So that's why I think Tana looked at this one before I even was thought of to come over here. I hadn't looked at 1964 in a while, so I would like the opportunity to go and look at it for myself before I say I'm comfortable with the recommendation of the changes that are.
Well, it's very clear that we should do that, I think. But, I mean, because I certainly wouldn't want to defer the one that was before you. And
Chairman, could I
several reasons
jump in?
why that is, but I won't do it right now. I would not refer to the one that was before you. That's all I'll say.
Barry, we've got David wants to make a comment, please.
Yeah, can I jump in with one question? Now, I heard something about the ADA. I thought I heard somebody talking about the ADA, reasonable accommodation. Are we on reasonable accommodation issue, or are we on 64 Civil Rights Act?
We're on the Civil Rights Act, but they're saying it's the language, having multiple languages is a requirement based on.
So it's more than just
It's just more than what's written in the
caption.
Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, Age Discrimination Act of 1975, Section 501 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and establishment of a complaint process. So it's more than that one topic. So it is quite extensive. And it has, it's been commented on.
Well, it still would, under the theory that we're operating, it would still, we could ask questions now, obviously,
Right.
and or send everything to committee and then take up that particular item now, or wait till the next meeting, or wait till the full meeting where we can get a full legal analysis. I think I heard said that some of it was out for external review. Does that mean then that we would have a document from an attorney to say the consequences for doing this is the same as what we have been doing, or adopting this would require us to do the following things that we don't necessarily have to do?
I'm trying to understand.
Well, when it's out for external review, I think what Susan was referencing to is that we got public comment on it.
Yes.
And in that public comment, there were several comments from
Attorneys.
local attorneys.
Within the general public, the people who read our documentation have a variety of backgrounds. As you see in other documents as we get them, section advocacy is very involved, etc. On this particular one, any necessary changes have been made to produce what you see in front of you. So no one has indicated that we are out of compliance with changes. In fact, we're trying to.
All right.
We are in compliance.
I'm just wondering if we're over compliant, but that's another story. But
Well,
anyway.
all right. Let's handle this one then separately from the rest. Why don't we move to, since we have sent it out for external review and have gotten no public comments back, what about a motion to approve it and send it to committee? Full committee.
Well, it is in committee now. So what we could do
No,
is.
the commission, the full commission.
Okay. We could do that. Oh, we could defer all of these to staff except that one and then bring that one to the full commission. Is that what you'd like to do, David?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, refer everything. I want to hear Mary's take on that and legal opinion. I don't want to jump somebody
This has been out for public comment. We did get public comment, and I believe the person that commented on this is an attorney, is she not? With P&A, I believe she might be. But I think those questions, it really goes to that we have kind of, like Barry said, kind of extended the definition to include more things, which is, in my book, fine, especially if it's an old act. And I'm good with that. I'm good with it coming to the commission as that we have met the criteria for this. We can have Candace give another review, and if it isn't good, we'll pull it. Candace, dang,
You were doing so
I was doing good here. I just have a name issue. But anyway, I believe this one has been out for public comment. The comments have been taken into consideration, and the changes have been made.
True.
So, you know, I just what concerns me more is our process. I want to nail down the process. So if we're just going to bring everything to the policy committee, and after you guys review it, you say, that can go to staff to take care of, and that needs to go to the commission. I just need to know what you want us to do, and we will comply with what you want us to do.
Sure, okay, and I think we've sort of gotten that worked out. Then let's open it up. Chairman, is it okay if I make a motion?
Go ahead.
All right, I move that we specifically affirm the civil rights section that you have brought up as separate from the other items to be directed to staff for review, all of which should be available for the full commission approval or disapproval at the next commission meeting.
Okay.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second, Gary? Or what do you say?
So I'm going to second it, but I want to make sure that for clarification purposes, I understand exactly what David means. So if I could ask that question, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page, David. So we have with the exception of 700-02DD that we just removed, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 policies that are going to be reviewed and revised by staff and then presented to the commission as a whole. And again, this comes back to what Pat was saying, this question of our work. And I understand what you're saying about making work for ourselves, Pat. But quite frankly, if it's a policy, I think that the commission's job is to vote on it. And there may be times when it is as simple as this is fairly straightforward. Director makes a recommendation and we go along with that. And not everyone has to be subject to external debate. But if I understood what Pat was recommending, what Mary was saying earlier, that there was this concept that certain policies after being reviewed would just be approved by the executive director as opposed to the commission. I don't like that idea. I like what David has said. So I just want to clarify that I'm understanding what staff is saying.
Yeah.
I'm understanding what David is saying.
your interpretation of what I moved is exactly right.
Okay.
And until we really think through, you don't want to give, Mary's wonderful, but you don't want to give plenary power. We need one as a full commission, one last bite at the apple, because the in-between time, somebody could call, Gary might make a panic phone call and say, do you realize that there's this thing that has gone to staff and it's going to become in front of you, and you all typically might rubber stamp, but you need to take another look at boom, boom, boom. Well, that gives us as a commission, and we should have the responsibility this way, to say, wait a minute, something has come up about, could somebody answer that question? And then it arises and gets corrected or modified, or we find there was no substance to the panic phone call that somebody made. But it lets the commission have one last review. That's what we, I think, really need to do. So what staff says on these performance things that the chairman was talking about just a little while ago, it's a plethora of things that basically nobody's going to argue with, but it still comes to the commission for a final look at. And that's sort of SOP, I think, in the legislative world. That's SOP. It might not be in the administrative world, but I think for the time being, let's keep the ball. Let staff make these decisions, bring them to us. Final determination by the full commission. That I think is the wise approach to take on how to review these things.
And if I may speak, I concur. I'd also give staff backup that someone reviewed our work. I think it's maybe a little time consuming, but I don't think it's that much, because a lot of the policies are rote and there's very few changes. So there wouldn't be a lot to go over, but I would give staff backup on this. The other thing that I would ask, if you could change the motion to bring these policies, this group, in the July meeting, because I'm telling you now, I'm looking at the June agenda, and because we have the contracts to go over, it is a long agenda. So we wouldn't be able to give these the due diligence that needs to be for the commission in that short amount of time. If that's okay, we'd like it in the July meeting.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, what are you talking about? July or August or what?
No, just July.
Okay.
Okay, I have
I'll modify my motion if Gary, can you, if you can, okay.
Yes, I will second the amendment.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate that.
Okay, just let me reiterate one more time that the policy committee will see each of these policies before we decide whether it goes to the staff or not, and then we will, then according to that, then we need to go back, it seems to me, to the original policy of how this is operated then, and we need to add something to it and fix that before this meeting ends.
Yeah, we need some clarifying language in there. That's fine. It's not much.
Well, then we need to add a section in there that says that if the policy committee lets it go straight to the staff, that it will ultimately come back to the commission for a vote at the next available meeting.
Yeah. I think that if we just say delegate to staff, who will then bring their recommendations to the full commission.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it. Okay, I'm fine. I wasn't trying to harbor any authority. If anybody thinks that, I really wasn't. I think it's fine that the committee the commission votes on all of them, and I think it could be voted on in a very rapid period of time if everybody was prepared. The key thing is, and I would ask everybody on the commission the same thing, that you are prepared for a commission meeting whenever it comes up. That's the key, so that we can move fast, because we can do a lot of things in a relatively short period of time if everybody's prepared and we move. So anyway, even whether it's a commission meeting or a policy meeting. So the next thing is, so wait a minute, do we need to make a motion or have we to make a second to amend?
You got a motion and a second. Chairman, you got a motion and a second on the floor.
Yes.
For the
To amend the procedure for review.
Okay, to amend the procedure, I'm sorry. Okay, motion made and seconded to amend, motion made and seconded to amend the procedure. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, the next thing I think we need to do is make a motion to do all the, I don't think we ever made a motion seconded to do all these procedures except for the 1964 Civil Rights Act to go to commission, but I mean, to go to the staff. But if they're all going, if everybody's going to staff and coming back to the commission anyway, then wouldn't we be just making a motion to bring all these to the staff and then back to the commission?
I think David did make the motion, and I seconded it with the
Yeah.
amendment that it was going to be reviewed in
It was
July.
modified to talk about July, bringing back the large voluminous thing that the staff is going to examine, and that was that modification was okay with Gary. So we've got that motion and second, Mr. Chairman, on the floor also.
I agree.
Okay, so they're on. Okay, all right. I'm sorry, I didn't realize we had two going at the same time. I promise I'll do better at next meeting. I did better last one, and I'm due for a bad meeting, so I apologize.
And I do want, can I say one more thing? I just want everybody to know, it looks like there's a lot of work on this. These directives have already been out for public comment. They're already been edited and updated. We will do a review. We've already looked at them, so when we bring them to you, we're just going to
They'll
be
be as
bringing them to you.
is.
Okay?
We'll just produce a final version and we'll go to the commission with them.
That's what we're
Understanding
doing.
that we-
Not out for public comment again. That's not necessary.
Nope, they've already been out for a very long time.
Right, they don't need to go out again.
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right, so that is.
That's the last
Well,
agenda.
motion made and seconded. We didn't vote on that. We didn't vote on that particular motion, have we?
No, we have not.
Go ahead and ask for the vote then, Chairman. I call for the question.
Okay, we would, thank you. We're, those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is adjournment.
No, I guess I can't do that.
Chairman, could I ask one quick question of staff? Now that we sort of have we wrapped up pretty much?
Yes. Go right ahead.
But one quick question: when items come on the public agenda before the full commission, we have a little packet of information that gives us all the details. As I understand, what comes up for review that somebody could see out in the public does not have anything but the agenda. They do not have available to them if somebody wanted to see everything we're seeing. I don't know if that is correct or not, or but transparency would tell me that what is available to us in our packets and online should be available to the public also at the full commission. And I want to make sure that that is happening, and it probably is, and I've just misunderstood somebody that was asking me the question. So
All the documents are attached to the recording and the minutes when they go out. They'll have packets when they were coming here, but we don't have all this, all the information that you have when you are looking at the meeting. The general public is not going to have that, but they will have access to every bit of it once the meeting is posted. Everything your packet goes online once the meeting is posted.
Correct. So that's all.
okay, so the public, another legislator, another senator, if she or he is trying to see the substance of the agenda, can find that. That's available. You're sure of that?
It's not available at the time of the meeting. It's available when the meeting is posted after it occurs.
Oh, okay. You'll have to straighten me out on that. I'm a little confused, but as long as you tell me that the public's got
They
access to it.
have access to what is in your packet.
So David, we get
No,
it
I'm trying
first.
to find out how would somebody see it? If another state senator says, hey, I was trying to review this and I don't know, you all passed something and I see it on the agenda as item number 4 under new business, but I didn't, where's the substance of the thing? Then I tell them what? How do they get the How do they get to see what I see and what we voted?
They're not going to get to see what you see at the time you see it, but they would see it afterwards.
What she's
Okay,
saying is
all right.
after we vote on it, that's what it would happen. Then they would see it.
Gary,
Right.
I am speaking clearly on that, right?
Yes, yeah, just to clarify, David, so we have all those materials. After the meeting is over, after the commission has adjourned, those materials get posted up. So they wouldn't be able to see it before the meeting or during the meeting, but after adjournment, when everything is posted, those materials are included.
And that would be, they would go to the website. Maybe at the full commission, I'll ask exactly how an individual can look at it after the meeting is over, once it's posted up. That is where to go to on the site. It's a pretty substantial site we've got. So you have to know sort of how to handle it to maneuver around it. It's a great site. I love our website.
It's pretty simple to get to. Like, I was just checking them last night. I didn't check minutes. You just go to the website, you go to the tab where commission is, about us and this commission, and listed on one side is all the meetings, the agendas, the meeting minutes, you can get to the videos, you can get to everything.
Commission policies and stuff.
Okay.
It's all on I'm trying to look at the side, it's on your right side,
Yeah.
just in a list. Most of our public, I haven't had too many people, with the exception of my mother, having trouble finding those documents. And she has trouble finding anything on the web.
Okay, I'm at the full commission. I'll clarify it so anybody listening can understand how to do it. Well, thank you all very much. Do you need a motion, Chairman, to adjourn?
Yes, sir, I do. And I wanted to say before we adjourn that I appreciate the quickness by which this meeting went. It was supposed to take longer than it did, and I'm thankful it did not. I will say that I'll try to do a better job next time. So other than that, you can make a motion to adjourn.
I think it's Gary's turn.
Oh,
Then I will move to adjourn with my trust me, Mr. Chairman, I understand how hard it is to keep track of these things.
Thank you, sir.
So yeah, I think it's fine. So I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Gary, you're the chairman of the full commission. You see how stuff bounces around like ping pong balls sometimes.
Trust me, I'm taking, sometimes
I think our chairman did a great job today. All right, I second the motion to adjourn, Chairman.
Second.
We're adjourned, whether you want to or not, because it's been motioned and seconded. I don't have to say anything else.
All right.
Good evening.